Most of the sales or revenue that a company generates today are the result of marketing that was done far, far, far into the past. Now, to highlight this point, I'm going to demonstrate with two examples. The first would be a low or mid price product, and the second is going to be a very expensive product. So let's think about Nike, and someone spends $150 to buy a pair of Nike shoes, or maybe they only spend $20 to buy a pair of Nike socks. What influenced their decision to do that? Well, if you think like most Facebook advertisers do, you would say, oh, it's because they saw an ad for Nike on Facebook, they decided to buy. But that's a very simplistic perspective. Really, what's happened here is Nike already existed in people's minds. It was already in their consideration set. It was already a brand that they knew and appreciated for a very long time. And they've heard of it before. They've seen advertisements perhaps for it all their lives. Maybe they've seen it advertised at sports events on TV and through Facebook videos. So that decision to buy Nike, although the attribution might say they bought it because of a retargeting ad on Facebook, the real driver there was the brand advertising, the brand marketing that was done over decades. Now, the other example is when somebody goes and buys a Mercedes. Well, did they buy a Mercedes because they saw an ad on Facebook today or yesterday? No. That would be ridiculous. Instead, it was advertising and other types of marketing that was done over decades of influencing people, of making them associate Mercedes with luxury, associated with sedans, associated with SUVs, with sports cars, etc. So here we see that people's purchase decisions are not just sort of this reflexive, I saw an ad and I bought. It was an influencing behavior or an influencing effect that happened over a long period of time. Now, another thing to think about with this is we look at some of the research on CEO performance, and some of the research I saw indicated that the results that a CEO experiences are actually just reaping the effects that were done by previous CEOs. So how much impact you have may not be realized or may not be tangible until far into the future, because anything that has a serious impact, that impact is almost rarely immediate. It's something that builds over time, and you plant the seeds today and you reap the harvest next season. So that's what we see when we're doing broad advertising. Effects are not necessarily immediate. So now what I want to do is I want to give you some tips for launching a new brand. So we talked about some very established brands like Mercedes and Nike that are reaping the rewards today of decades of marketing. But what happens when you launch a new brand? And to do this, I'm going to highlight a quote from How Brands Grow Part 2. This is a book that's based on very robust research that's been done over long periods of time, looking at tons of sales data across numerous types of products in different industries and services. The first most essential memories to build are simply what this brand is and what it looks like so that it can be found. Often this is a case of saying we are in another accounting service, or we are another accounting service, or we are another soft drink, and this is our name, this is what we look like, and this is where and how you can buy us. People aren't looking for difference. So this is very different from the approach that most advertising gurus would advise. They would say, okay, let's find some super narrow position. Let's find a super narrow audience that's going to appreciate the value of your product. And then we'll do sort of this tactical sniper type activity with our Facebook ads. But here we're getting advice that's very, very different. It's basically saying we are another generic sort of form of whatever the product category is. Because the reality is that for most products, people aren't really looking for something that's all that different from what's already out there. There's a lot of variety that's out there because that's what people value. That's what there is demand for. So highlighting how you're different is almost highlighting why people shouldn't buy you. So when you're doing broad advertising, often all you're really trying to do is build memory between the product category and what your product is. An example that I often highlight is live chat software. So if you're selling software that is a live chat plugin for people's websites, you just want to say, hey, we're live chat software. You don't necessarily need to talk about how you're different. Same thing if you're selling anti-sock software, socks. Just say we're anti-sweat or sweat wicking, whatever terminology you want to use, and associate that with your brand and your name, and go to town with that. Okay, here's the disappointing part. Context-specific memory is not something that's easily tracked without doing your own research. So a lot of the impact of broad advertising is influencing people's psychology, influencing their memory. But that's not something that you can easily look at a Facebook interface or your CRM or your software and say, hey, I was able to get 5% of people's brain activity, or I'm able to embed myself in people's memories. That's not something you can track easily digitally. So often what you need to do is either do your own research, which may not be worth it. So, for example, if you're only spending $500 a month on Facebook ads, are you really going to do a survey that's going to cost you $700? Probably not. It's not going to be worth doing the research. So, really, what you're going to have to rely on are the metrics that are easily available. And I would say that since memory isn't really practical, reach is going to be the main KPI that you're going to track over time. Is, are you reaching a lot of people? And perhaps what you could do is to see the impact on memory, just sort of get some qualitative feedback from people when you show them an ad, the creative that you're doing for Facebook advertising, and that might be a more realistic way of getting input without spending a lot of money.